Hello again. Today we're going to talk about werewolves. Got Talbot here to help me. More specifically, Western civilization versions of werewolves, because many their culture, civilizations, whatever, had their version of a werewolf or a similar shape-shifting creatures, human to animal. So I'm going to limit myself. The American Indians had skinwalkers. Thing about those is like all of them had like a different tradition. Most of the tribes had a different tradition. They were similar but different. So trying to lump all those together would be hard. You know, Asia had various creatures that could take on human form or humans that could take on creature form. We can find it in various, other parts of the world. We're going to stick mostly to Western civilization, as well as to the development of and how the myths changed over time. So, to begin with, lycanthrope, werewolf. It is wolf to man. You will find many like role-playing games that'll have lycanthropes, and then they'll list like were-rats, were-bears, werewolves. No, the term lycanthrope specifically refers to lycos, wolf, anthropos, man. It's from the Greek. There is therianthropy, is changing to other animals or to animals in general, and that is from the Greek. Therion is for wild beast, and so that can be so lycanthropy is a subset of therianthropy, if you want to look at it that way. Werewolf is from Old English. We get it from various Dutch and Anglo-Saxon forms. But wer or ver, W-E-R, meaning man, specifically meaning male. Man means people in general. Were versus with, or ver versus with, however they were pronouncing them, is male and female. So werewolf is coming from man as in male, wolf. That's where that comes from. So it's literally man wolf as opposed to werewolf. Anyway, back to the Greek. Lycanthropy or lycanthrope. Herodotus actually used that to describe madness. So we do have, it's common today that there were times there's like a fungus that got in the wheat or the barley, and it could drive people mad, and people thought they were turning into animals or thought they felt fur growing or something like that. And Herodotus actually described this using the term lycanthropy or lycanthrope to describe the people. So he recognized it as a form of madness. The idea of it being a person came later, or perhaps earlier. So the oldest European werewolf story is probably King Lycaon, Lycaon. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right or not. And he was actually considered a good king for the most part. He did good things and cultural works and all that. However, there are various different forms of the story. Actually, there are about 10 different forms of the story. Primarily, he questioned Zeus's authority. So he was going to find out if Zeus was truly omnipotent. He would be able to tell the difference between a normal sacrifice and the sacrifice of a human being. And then there's, again, different versions of the story. Some say he sacrificed his own son. Some say he sacrificed his grandson. Some say it was a prisoner. There are different versions of the story. But in all cases, Zeus realized what was going on, got mad, killed a bunch of people with lightning bolts, and turned Lycaon into a wolf. That's apparently where it ends. I saw one YouTube video where he turned into a man-wolf creature hybrid type thing, but all the other sources just say he turned into a wolf, and that was it. He didn't turn in, he didn't have the ability to turn from wolf to human and human to wolf again or anything like that. He was just a wolf. And it was basically, yeah, you did a horrible animalistic thing by sacrificing your son or serving your son or whatever you did to your son. Again, different versions of the story say you did different things. So I'm going to make you into a beast-like creature. And that beast was a wolf in most cases. Like I said, one or two internet videos say it was a hybrid creature, but original sources don't seem to support that. Next, we come to, believe it or not, Little Red Riding Hood. The Resurrectionist, a series I sometimes watch. They go into the history of old nursery rhymes, fairy tales, stuff like that. They have one on Little Red Riding Hood, where apparently before the Grimm brothers did it, there were other versions where the wolf seems to take on human form, or vice versa. So the question raised is, was it a werewolf, or was it a wolf? It can talk. It tried to get Little Red Riding Hood to do some hey nani nani, suggesting that it was human in some forms. So that I'm including as the older versions of Little Red Riding Hood, at least, can possibly include werewolves. Now, one possible thing here, werewolves are associated with sorcery, so it's not a curse, it is something you do to yourself. And the idea being, if you go far enough, and we're getting into stuff like, eating blood or cannibalism or stuff like that, then you will gain the ability to turn into a wolf at will. And so some people, one of the suggestions that the Resurrectionist makes on their video is that this was actually a warning to beware of black magic, which would make sense. And yes, that is, the ability to change shapes would be a very deeper magical thing in the world of black magic and sorcery. That would make sense. Then we start to get to the movies. So there was a third source of literature, which I will get into later because it came after the movie started. It's interesting to look at, though. But Universal made The Werewolf of London in 1935. Now it starts out guys trying to find a rare plant. He's attacked by a wolf-like creature, and so he becomes a werewolf of London. And he finds the plant he was dealing with, when it blooms, which it only blooms like 3 times a month, that can be used to prevent the transformation. And so there's a whole other plot going along with it. Not going to spoil it, because it's not a bad movie, it's just not as popular as most. But the one thing here is, so it's the 3 nights are the 3 nights of the full moon, which are basically the full moon and the night before and after it when it's closest to being full. They sort of wrote that in for the movie. That's like the first time probably that anyone said, hey, the full moon is more than 1 night. I could be wrong there, but that's probably, astronomers don't count the full moon as 3 nights until more recent times, when possibly influenced by this movie. And so this is the first actual look. The moon influences werewolfism in some form. You turn into a werewolf during these nights, and the plant that cures you blooms these 3 nights. And so, nice coincidence you got running there. Now, how did this come about? I would assume, Hollywood, Southern California, they're familiar with the, coyotes howling at the moon, stuff like that. So someone just made the association howling at the moon, wolf. Okay, we're gonna associate this with the wolf. It's possible they just decided, okay, we just need a plot twist, so let's associate the plant with the moon, and then in turn associate the werewolf with the moon. Like I said, don't know how they came across this, but this is like the first reference I could find of the moon affecting a werewolf. Back, with the old sorcery thing, it was something you could do at will. If you trade your soul to the devil or whatever and get deep enough into black magic, you can change into a wolf whenever you want. And now, the movies, now it's starting to become a curse. Although, if you go back to King Lycan, we could say he was also a curse. So, when did it go from being sorcery to curse, or was it always both or either? Or that's a good question. Again, a lot of werewolf stories didn't get written down, so it's hard to tell. Then what? 7 years later, 1943, the Wolfman. This is the one that popularized werewolves more than anything, probably. And here's where they added it can only be killed by silver. And why did that come about? Silver, you go back to like ancient alchemy and stuff like that. Silver is associated with the moon. It's considered purity. We can go into all sorts of possible reasons. But they decided, werewolves, it takes silver to kill a werewolf now. And this is something that just became accepted up to a point. They made several more Wolfman movies. He meets Dracula, he meets Frankenstein, he meets Abbott and Costello. The Abbott and Costello one, they have like 5 full moons in a row, which that was just me geeking out and counting full moons. During this whole thing, we have, let's see if I can find a date on this. I had a date. 1949. And written in 1949, eventually published in 1951. So it's actually after all the Universal werewolf movies. Prince Caspian by C.S. Lewis. Had a werewolf in it. Briefly. They killed it by cutting its head off. The end. So the full universal, this is how you kill a werewolf, and can only change by full moon and all that, did not seep back into the literary culture quite as fast as it has in modern times. So C.S. Lewis went back to the older traditions and created his werewolf as he wanted his werewolf. Just thought I'd bring that up just to show that, it was the movies, especially Universal Pictures, which really got us our modern day werewolf isms. Now, Fox Network, when it was early on, they had a show called Werewolf. Let's see, 1987 to 1988 was when it ran. I never actually watched it myself. I heard about it. And one thing there was the main character was attacked by a wolf-like creature. He now has the curse of the werewolf. But he somehow finds out if he kills the werewolf that changed him, then he will revert back to normal human. Which is the first I could find, first reference I could find to this happening. So we added to the myth again. And it continues. There was Monster Force, a 1994 cartoon which had basically monsters fighting crime. One of the monsters was a descendant of Larry Talbot, supposedly, who was the Wolfman in the Universal films. And he was trying to find the man, in the movie, Larry Talbot killed Bela Lugosi, who was the werewolf who changed him. In the cartoon, apparently they just wrote in that wasn't. So the werewolf character is trying to end his curse by finding the werewolf who transformed his ancestor. And then we have American Werewolf in Paris, 1997, where again we come back to the you can cure your lycanthropy by killing the werewolf who transformed you. So we continue to add to the myth. Now, interesting thing, can vampires control werewolves? And this is something that comes up in a few pop culture references, and this mostly I think comes from Dracula. Basically, he used his powers to control. There's the early scene, where Jonathan Harker goes to Transylvania, and the wolves are howling, and Dracula, oh, the children of the night, they sing so well. And then there's later on where he breaks a wolf out of a zoo in order to break a window and tear the garlic away from the window so that he can get into Mina Harker. And so I think some people have taken those two references and said, vampires can control werewolves. Now, there are some traditions, European traditions. Again, the whole story changes as you go throughout Europe. So to say this is how werewolves work, that has never been a real, thing you can say. Different countries had their different werewolf myths, and they treated them differently. And there are some places which say, if you kill a werewolf, it'll come back as a vampire. So that might have led to some people saying, aha, vampires can control werewolves. Now, where does that come from? And that goes back to the whole sorcery thing. Sorcerers, if you do blood rituals and all sorts of nasty stuff, you can gain the ability to turn into a wolf, so you become a werewolf. And in so doing, you have basically sold your soul. And so if you sell your soul, then when you die, you come back as the undead, and now you're a vampire. So that is possibly where that comes along also. So that's it. Like I said, I've always sort of liked werewolves, especially the Wolfman stories, because he was trying to fight the curse, and he wasn't just an evil person; he was a cursed person, which isn't the way all werewolf stories work. But an interesting take on it, and I just thought I'd talk about it because as I, looking at the various werewolf stories, it's obvious that we have continued to add to the folklore. We may look at these and say, oh, how funny these superstitious people were. But they were telling stories, and we're continuing to build on the same stories. So, we know better now, and we say, aha, it's not real. There aren't real werewolves running around. But at the same time, it fascinates us enough that we continue to build onto the folklore, as it would. So who knows, maybe 100 years from now, someone will look back, think that we believe in werewolves, and, because we added to the story, think that we actually believe in them. Who knows? That's all. Have a nice day.